My name's Melissa Potter, and my earliest experiences with art are kind of a roundabout answer to the question. My first childhood memory is my mom's sewing table, and I was about 3 years old, and I remember she laid out all the fabric, and I helped her cut. And she made a lot of my clothes. She made quilts. And so I spent a lot of years making paper, thinking that it had something to do with printmaking, but ultimately I realized that it's a textile art and it connects me back to my mother's work in textiles. It took me a long time to figure out that paper making is often the same fiber that's used for clothing. So cotton, flax, even things like pineapple fiber in Asia, they're used to make material, they're used to make fabric, but they're also used to make paper. And so I think of them really as kind of one and the same. In the past few years, I've started getting more interested in embroidery, weaving. I've been spinning some of my papers to do weavings. I don't know that I can do paper embroidery, but I probably can. But I like to mash them up. I'm sort of like reversing my trajectory back through my history and doing a lot of different types. Yeah, so paper is thought to have originated in 105 AD in China and made its way through Asia and then on into Europe. I mean, Europe likes to think of itself as being so first world comparative to the rest of the world, but it wasn't for more than 1,000 years that paper making really took hold in Europe. And yeah, I'm really interested in ancient processes, mostly because I'm really interested in handwork by women. And again, we go back to the beginning, right? I had a friend once say, we all go back to the beginning. And I realize the extent to which that's true in my life as well. But I find these processes a really interesting way to connect with history and also to try to reinterpret for the future and think about how they're relevant, because they're kind of absurd, really. I mean, any of this work, to make paper by hand in the 21st century is partly absurd, but I enjoy all of that absurdity, and I think it's really kind of the foundation of my art practice.
When Melissa came up with the brilliant idea to use Loretta and Annabelle's manure to make paper with, it makes perfect sense because paper is made from, usually from wood pulp or from plant pulp, and Loretta and Annabelle being vegetarian, that is their diet. And so Loretta and Annabelle, the way an equine's digestive system works is that their stomach works like an oven. And so the first phase of paper making was actually done by Loretta and Annabelle. And then Melissa, of course, then further processed their manure into making the pulp that then became the paper. And because Loretta and Annabelle, their digestive systems are slightly different, like any humans is, like any animals are, they processed what they eat differently. They are on slightly different diets, but the bulk of 90% of their diet is the same thing. They both eat mostly the pasture and hay.
I've made paper with practically everything, but I had never made dung paper. And so I thought that would be something interesting to learn, but I had no idea how to do it. So I had to do a lot of research, and I enjoy that kind of research as part of the process and part of the labor. I mean, one of the jokes I've been making about these is I did the whole process and ended up with about 14 pieces of paper. I mean, this is not a very productive form of labor. Well, I mean, it's this also like experiential education, right? That we can know things, but we don't really know them entirely until we do them. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of a lot of way people learn in school. You have to actually, you can read about it, but to really know it, you have to touch it, engage with it, understand it in that way. And I think that there's a lot of learning that takes place in all of those very labor-intensive processes that we take for granted. I mean, I think there's also value in considering where we are in the world, too, with thinking about labor and the intensity of things, that maybe everything can be automated now, but are we learning the same thing? Are we experiencing the same thing? Do we have the same tactility and touch? And of course, synesthesically, how do those things relate to the way we think and talk and are as humans? So I think that they have endless things to teach us about how to be. I mean, it was just such a hoot and a holler the whole way through. Annabelle and Loretta made totally different paper. They're different animals, stuff hangs out in their stomach for longer. One of them has, like she poops a lot more, the other kind of chills out, and she, the older one, Loretta, she's ruminating, it's going on in there for a lot longer. And I didn't think they were going to be different, but they totally were. And that was the genesis of the idea for the portraits. I just think, I literally took sort of a portrait of their insides, their little farm labor. I was calling it a different kind of farm labor. And it was ridiculously labor intensive, but it all pulled off, and that was totally amazing. The quality of the paper was better than I thought it would be. Cultivator, well, I mean, Cultivator is exactly the kind of space that I want to be making work. I feel like, this is just my opinion, but I really personally have kind of a crisis of the art world and the idea of making objects for sale. I think that today, especially in the era of climate crisis, these kinds of connections where people can come, many of whom don't have outdoor spaces, don't have interactions with animals, and art is kind of the perfect match for me. Art on the farm, that works for me, so.